Okay, let's talk about the Pacers. Continuing with basketball, we're going to talk about the NBA. The Pacers play the Grizzlies tomorrow. The NBA is back tonight. The Lakers play the Hornets randomly today, and then I think there's 18 teams, 9 games that play tomorrow. So the majority of the NBA is working its way back in. This weekend is, of course, the first weekend back after the All-Star break. Every team has had rest. Teams have had opportunities to get healthy. This is an opportunity for the Pacers to take on the Grizzlies at home to kick off a string of games against Western Conference playoff teams, I suppose. They play the Grizzlies at home on Thursday. At home on Sunday, they play the Clippers and then the Nuggets on Monday. Those two games might be flipped around, so we'll preview them on Friday. Big weekend for the Pacers. But we're going to start with the Grizzlies game. Pacers have an opportunity to reset. They kind of, and I talked about this the last show, the last segment about the Pacers, where they've kind of been screwed by the schedule. I hate to use that as an excuse, but it's true that the Pacers went to Paris and then came back for a couple home games, then went out to the West Coast for 4 games, came back. First home game was the Knicks, and then turned right back around and went out to Washington to play the Wizards. So the Pacers have done a lot of travel, right? They've done a lot of dotting around the country, playing some very high-quality opponents. As a result, their record has kind of slid back. I believe they're 6-4 in their last 10 games. Last game before the All-Star break was an overtime win over the Wizards on the road, which was difficult and taxing, but they made it happen. And now they have the Grizzlies. So we get a break, and now it's 3 Western Conference surefire playoff teams back to back to back. I'm interested to see if the Pacers can pick up a win here against the Grizzlies. It's going to be difficult. They're looking to stay in control of the 4 seed. The Grizzlies are 36-18. They're number 2 in the West. They're 8 games back from OKC and half a game above Denver. Memphis is 15-12 on the road. They're 7-3 in their last 10 games. Their last 10 games before the All-Star break. Their best player is Jaren Jackson Jr., statistically. He has 23 points per game. Ja Morant and Desmond Bane round out the big 3. So really, and the Grizzlies have a great supporting cast, but really they have a big 3 group of stars. It's Jaren Jackson Jr., Ja Morant, Desmond Bane. If they're all playing and all playing well, Memphis can beat anybody. And that is sort of evidenced by the fact that they're the best offense in the league. They score the most points. They score 123 points per game, number 1 in the league in basically every scoring category. They're first, second, fourth, something like that, but first in points per game. This is the best offense statistically in the NBA. And that's also evidenced by last time the Grizzlies played the Pacers, they won 136-121 at home in Memphis. That was on December 1st. It was a part of a 4-game losing streak for the Pacers. And again, this was the time when the Pacers were bad. And this is the time when the Pacers were injured. They were up 19 against the Grizzlies on the road. It was fantastic. And then Jaren Jackson Jr.'s 25 points led the way in turning things around. But regardless, the Grizzlies score, and they score a lot. 136-121 was the victory in December when the Grizzlies took on the Pacers. And the way the Grizzlies are built statistically, they're really built to succeed on the offensive end of the floor. They're number 2 in points in the paint. They're number 4 in rebounds. Their front court is very strong. They shoot a very high volume of shots. They take a very high volume of shots. They're one of the best at offensive rebounding, but not very good at defensive rebounding. And that's a very important point that we're going to touch on in a second. And on top of that, they turn the ball over quite a bit in transition. So Memphis shoots the ball at a high volume, and they score the majority of the time. They're a very great team shooting the basketball. They shoot at a high volume. If they make it, they make it. If they miss, then they're also one of the best rebounding teams in the league. They rebound very effectively on offense, and most likely they're going to run it up on the Pacers once again. Evidence again of how great the Memphis Grizzlies are on offense is that the last 3 times the Grizzlies have lost, I mentioned the fact that they were 7-3 in their last 10 games. All 3 of those losses, this is the amount of points that the opposing winning team scored: 128, 125, and the Knicks put up 143. So it's basically factual that in the last 10, well, it is factual that in the last 10 games, the only teams to knock off the Memphis Grizzlies, the number 2 team in the Western Conference, they've needed 125 points or more, which is a bit concerning because that's asking a lot of any team, and it's especially asking a lot of the Pacers right after the All-Star break. Again, 125 points. That's the minimum amount of points that a team has needed to beat the Grizzlies if they were to win against the Grizzlies in the past 10 games. Those teams were all playoff teams. I believe it was the Knicks, the Lakers, and I believe OKC as well was the other one. So all playoff teams, 2 of them in the West, 1 in the East, all teams that are potentially title contenders. They're actually all on my list of title contenders in a second. So if the Pacers are going to beat the Grizzlies, even though they're in Gainbridge, they're probably going to need over 125 points. Definitely going to need over 100, probably going to need over 120, 115, somewhere around that range. That's where the Pacers are going to need to be. So if Memphis is going to score, and they are going to score, because, again, it's going to be very difficult. They take shots at a high volume, and they take shots quickly into their possessions. It's going to be difficult to thwart their possessions right away. In transition is really the big indicator, the big area of the floor that's going to be the most of a swing for the Pacers, is if they can turn the ball over in transition, which is something that the Grizzlies do struggle with. That's the area of the floor the Pacers need to excel in defensively. Because if you let them get down the floor, they're shooting and they're scoring. And if they're not, they're rebounding and they're probably scoring on their second chance opportunity. So in transition, defensively, that's where the Pacers are going to have to turn the ball over. That's where the Pacers are going to have to make stops, especially down the stretch in this game. If they don't do that, Memphis is going to score. And as a result, Indiana is going to have to score in response. They're going to have to beat Memphis at their own game. Remember my point from before. Memphis isn't very good. I think they're 24th in the league in defensive rebounding. So when Indiana has the basketball, they've got to shoot, they've got to score, and they have to rebound. And they should be able to, because this is a team that's now basically fully healthy. We'll see if Miles Turner comes back. I think he will. We'll also see if John Morant plays on the other side. But Memphis knows how to win without John Morant. They've been without John Morant plenty this season and in seasons past. So for Indiana, right? Defensively, it's in transition, forcing turnovers. That's how they're going to make stops. Most likely, Memphis is going to just score anyway. If that is the case, then Indiana has to score in response. And probably regardless, Indiana is going to have to score at a high volume in response. Again, opposing teams that have beaten the Grizzlies have needed 125 points or more in the last 3 times that the Grizzlies have lost. So the Pacers, they're going to have to play Memphis' way. They're going to have to rebound the basketball offensively. They're going to have to score. They're going to have to shoot well. They're going to have to hit a lot of threes. They're going to have to be gutsy enough to take those tough shots in those situations. Our big 3 has to knock off their big 3, right? Our big 3 just has to be better, especially if Ja plays. Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is a killer big 3 and one that's honestly capable of winning an NBA title. So the Pacers have to have a 3 to combat that. Now, what's interesting about the Pacers is they don't have a clear big 3. That's what I kind of like about the Pacers. It's the fact that their success is focused on their supporting cast more than perhaps their stars. Tyrese Halliburton, if there is a big 3, Tyrese Halliburton is in it. Pascal Siakam is in it. The question is, in this game, in a vacuum, in this game, zoom in on these 48 minutes, right? Who is going to be that third guy? Halliburton has to be playing well. Siakam has to be playing well down low. Someone has to be the third guy. We saw Mathurin take over against Washington. If Miles Turner plays, we've seen him take over in the past. We've seen Andrew Nembhard take over in the past. It's probably one of them 3. Turner might not be fully 100% coming back from injury. Somebody has to be the third guy that's going to score at a high rate and be the third efficient offensive producer. Halliburton and Siakam have to be the first 2, most likely. Is it Mathurin? Is it Nembhard? Could it be Turner? Who is going to fill in that role as that third scorer for the Pacers, who's going to be able to allow Indiana to keep up with the Grizzlies in Gainbridge Fieldhouse? That's the question I am asking. Do the Pacers have a big 3 capable of matching the big 3 of the Grizzlies, if necessary, if John Morant plays? Indiana has to score. They have to rebound well offensively. They have to they may not have to, but they probably are going to have to get some stops in transition, force some turnovers in transition defensively. That's the key on defense. The key on offense is simply scoring, and it's individual play at that point. It's 3-on-3. Is Jaren Jackson Jr., John Morant, and Desmond Bane better than Halliburton, Siakam, and Mathurin or Nembhard or whoever's going to fill that role for the Pacers, that third guy? Do the Pacers have a third scorer in this game? That's going to be the interesting question. At home, they'll have the crowd at their backs. They have a great opportunity to even up the season series with the Grizzlies in this game. Is there a third scorer on this night, tomorrow night, against the Grizzlies? We will have to see. Again, the Grizzlies, phenomenal front court. Why? Zach Edey, to be honest. We just talked about him in the segment about Purdue, but Zach Edey's a major influence down there. So defensively, for the Pacers, force possessions to go your way in transition, in between the 3-point lines, right? Because that's where you're going to force turnovers. If you let them get down the floor, they're probably scoring statistically. And on offense, you just have to have a third scorer. Those are the two keys to me for the Pacers. I repeated myself a little bit there, but I think you get the point. We need one more premier scorer, and we need to make stops and transition defensively. I would put emphasis on that key to the game on offense because that's, of course, the emphasis of the Grizzlies. 128, 125, 143. Those are the three numbers of points that winning teams against the Grizzlies have had in their last 10 games. This could be a statement win, and there's a tiny little break between now and the next two games. Unfortunately, those two are at home. It's a stretch where the Pacers can pick up some big-time quality wins. They'll need it because, again, this team is a game ahead of Milwaukee, about a game above Milwaukee for the 4 seed. They're about 2 games ahead of Detroit. Pacers are still technically trying to catch up to New York for the 3 seed. I don't think that's going to happen. But trying to keep the 4 seed, trying to keep Game 7 in the first round at home is the goal for Indiana. I think and I imagine that they will be capable of doing that. It's going to start right now at the beginning of the post-All-Star break session of the season against the Memphis Grizzlies. Elsewhere in the league, tomorrow night, the New York Knicks play Chicago in Madison Square Garden. Should be an easy win for them. And Milwaukee hosts the Clippers, maybe a spot where the Pacers can extend their lead if the Clippers pick up a win during their East Coast swing. That's all I have to say about that. This Grizzlies game is a big one on Thursday, potentially overshadowed by the All-Star game. Potentially people are just working their way back in. Hockey's on that night. That's going to be a big deal. USA versus Canada. We'll talk about that later. But either way, right? The Pacers are in a spot where they can pick up a major tone-setting win for the rest of the season against the Grizzlies. They're going to need to make stops in transition, and they're going to need to have a third score alongside Halliburton and Siakam in order to keep up with the Grizzlies most likely. It's a very interesting game. It's a telling game. It's a game that can really show if the Pacers would be capable of winning in the NBA Finals, because the Grizzlies are a team that could be in the NBA Finals, and the Pacers are a team that, if they were to get there, would have to face the Grizzlies in a 7-game series. If you can win this one at home, it would be a great sign for the Pacers' longevity in the playoffs, but most importantly, set the tone for the rest of the season in a way that, of course, we would desire. Pacers-Grizzlies on Thursday, big-time game we'll talk about on Friday. I'm very excited to watch it all play out.